Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. This is not how I imagined my life. I've been unhappy for 18 years now, and there doesn't seem to be any relief. I don't even know how it happened. One minute I was a bachelor, a carefree guy, and before I knew it, I was married and not so happy anymore. I wouldn't call Sherry a doll, but she was friendly and approachable. For a guy like me, it was very important. The friendliness and accessibility meant that I could make a date and maybe not be rejected. It turned into a permanent relationship, and a year later, when I got a permanent job at a pumping plant, we got married. Now, 18 years later, I still work at the pumping plant and am still married. The biggest difference is that I now have 2 children. I've always been a calm person. I never wanted to be a boss or some kind of entrepreneur. I believed in the philosophy of agree and succeed, whatever that means. Don't make waves and don't piss anyone off. In most cases, I was good at it. What did I mean by most of the time? Well, as far as my marriage is concerned, it didn't work out. Sherry quickly realized that she could use my unusual character trait to her advantage. As a wife, I hardly complained about Sherry. She cooked well, kept the house clean, and kept herself in good shape. On the other hand, she quickly became bossy when she realized she could get away with it, and was not very frugal. I always wanted to buy us a house, but every time I saved up a few dollars, Sherry found something to spend it on. As a result, we still live in a rented house. Our credit cards have always had a full limit. Everything was not smooth in our family life. Our son Dwight was 16, and he was arrested twice for trafficking illegal substances. One more time, and he wouldn't have been paroled. Our 17-year-old daughter Gemma was 100% pure-blooded goth. Her lifestyle was beyond my reach, and her mother was completely supportive of her. There were no family dinners. I very rarely saw my children and communicated with them. My wife made it clear to me that I should mind my own business, and she would look after the children. As you can guess, my relationship with my wife was no better. A few years ago, she got a job at one of the local insurance agencies. I'm not sure exactly what the job was, but she liked it, so of course I kept my mouth shut. She said it was her money and that she could spend it as she pleased. This meant that the money was not spent on food, rent, utilities, or other household expenses. They were spent on clothes and visiting a beauty salon. Over the years, her salary has increased regularly, as has her wardrobe. All this time, I enjoyed working at the factory. I went through a career path in the company, and now I was a head collector. We did not produce mass-produced pumps, but produced special pumps for specific purposes. My job was to ensure that all the necessary components were available for each job. Not that it could be called an impressive career goal, but I was happy and satisfied. The salary was good, and the family received medical benefits. About 5 years ago, I suspected that my wife was having an affair. It didn't take long to check it out, because she didn't feel the need to hide it. I accepted all the usual lame excuses for her antics and never questioned her about anything. Why bother? Our bed life gradually declined until it came to naught. She didn't complain. I understood why she was getting such a good pay raise, because she was having an affair with her boss, Malcolm Hurd. I started saving some money on the side. In addition, I have a new hobby, wood carving. I didn't know anything about wood carving, but I had a penknife. I quickly realized that serious wood carvers don't usually use penknives, although they like to portray it in movies and TV shows. After a while, I got some good knives and some other tools. I started carving figures of small animals and moved on to more complex things. I found that the solitude in the basement brings me relaxation and pleasure. I realized that I was actually a planer, not a wood carver. I'm not sure what the difference is, but the word planer sounded more appropriate. And then I discovered the tree bark of a poplar tree. My planing classes have acquired a new meaning. The only problem seemed to be the availability of good bark. I finally found a tree bark source in Montana. Most of the carvings made of poplar bark, apparently, belong to the category of fancy houses or spirit of the tree. I decided to focus on learning how to build houses. As my passion for bark carving grew, my relationship with my family gradually faded away. My future was bleak, and I had no incentive or motivation to change it. I decided that I would die a lonely old man, sitting in my basement planing. I didn't care anymore. And then I got a call. Hello, Curtis? Curtis Langford? Yes. This is Marcia Hurd. Your wife works with my husband at Eagle Home Insurance. I think we met a few years ago at one of the company's meetings. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hurd. I don't remember meeting you. I haven't been to many of the company's events. I'm not usually invited. Well, anyway, the company is holding an awards ceremony this Friday, and you should schedule a visit. I think you'll be interested. Nothing official. A suit and tie will do. I don't think so, Mrs. Hurd. My wife usually doesn't really want me to go to events like this with her. I think she's afraid I'll embarrass her or something. I don't think I can come, but thank you for the invitation. This is more than just an invitation, Mr. Langford. I really think it would be in your best interest to come. I've already booked seats for you and your wife. The best quality ribs are served here. We'll see, but don't count on anything. I'm sure, Mr. Langford. See you on Friday. It was a strange conversation with a man I had never met. I had no interest or desire to attend such events. How will Sherry feel about this when she gets home? I was wondering if I should even tell her about Mrs. Hurd's call. Maybe I should buy a new tie. I decided to go online and order a new batch of tree bark. I had to do a lot of carving work. It was almost 8 o'clock when my wife finally returned home. I've already eaten, as usual. Sorry I'm late, dear. We are working on a large number of applications due to the storm that was last month. Did you cook Seema something to eat? Yes. Have you eaten yet? We ordered pizza delivered to the office. Today I received an interesting phone call from Mrs. Hurd. There's a corporate event on Friday night, and she insists that we come. I told her that you would probably be there, but not me. She insisted that we both needed to come. I have no idea why, and I didn't want to get into an argument with her. Let's see if you can sort this out by the end of the week. Why would Mrs. Hurd call you? I have no idea. I have no desire to attend any of your company's social events. You know that. Just take care of it. It must be important if she took the time to call you. Maybe you should just change jobs. It might be easier than annoying her. You know, of course, that she's the real owner of the company, not Malcolm. No, I didn't know that. I really don't care. Why are you so categorical about this? Why? Do you really want to know? It's embarrassing and humiliating for me to be around all your colleagues, because they know what our relationship is. I don't understand why you won't do everything in your power to get me to leave. It doesn't seem to bother you. What the hell are you talking about? Everything you're saying is complete nonsense. Everyone in your company knows about your relationship with Malcolm Hurd. Whenever they see me, they grin, giggle, or make snide comments. I can put up with it by avoiding them. That's why I just don't get in their way. Curtis, you're out of your mind. I do not know where you got such strange ideas from. You're going on Friday. This is the end of everything. Buy a new tie. No, forget about it. I'll buy you a new tie. Interestingly, she did not deny or defend her relationship with Malcolm Hurd. She just let it all evaporate. If you don't discuss it, then it doesn't exist. It was the first time I had said or suggested anything about her affair. There was no reaction on her part. For years, I tried not to rock the boat, and when I finally did, it turned out that it didn't matter. As if she didn't care if I knew or not. I decided that I needed an escape strategy. I won't take it anymore. I'll just keep living. I had 4 days to prepare. What was I ready for? I did not know. I've been a good guy for 18 years. I've wasted half my life. By the time Friday came, I was ready. All the options were considered, and one was chosen. The most difficult thing was to decide what to do with the children. I assumed they were both mine, but I didn't have a parental relationship with either of them. I tried, but failed. Sherry managed to push them away from me, and I let it happen. As a result, they both stopped being my problem. All I could do was provide for their livelihood. Sherry took a few minutes to make sure my tie was tied properly, and I swear I saw her smirking when she did it. On the way, I was reminded not to make a scene or do anything that might embarrass her. It was going to be a long night. This has never happened. There were only 50 or 60 people there, and I didn't know any of them. Sherry quickly walked away from me, and I went to the open bar and took a bottle of whatever beer they had available. I hadn't even finished the first one when I noticed that several younger guys were looking in my direction and smiling. When I turned away, I could make out the word cook and a few chuckles. Hello, my name is Gary. Gary Jones. You're Curtis, right? Sherry's husband? He held out his hand. I shook his hand and just nodded, silently confirming my identity. We stood in silence for a few seconds, and neither of us knew what to start talking about. So, Curtis, how long have you and Sherry been in an open marriage? I've heard of such arrangements, but I've never met anyone who really lived by it. He smiled and waited for some kind of answer. He wasn't a smart guy. It was a serious matter for him. I noticed a small group of women nearby who were looking in my direction and giggling. If I stay here, it's going to be a long night. It hadn't been 10 minutes since I walked in the door. I put the half-empty bottle on the counter, turned to my companion, and shook his hand again. It was nice to meet you, Gary Jones. Have a nice evening. I turned around and quietly left the building. I spent the next hour loading my 10-year-old truck. I was glad that I spent so much time preparing. I was trying to decide if I wanted to take the George Foreman or not when my cell phone rang. Curtis? Curtis, are you here? This is Marcia Hurd. Yes, I'm here. How can I help you, Mrs. Hurd? You disappeared. I saw you and your wife come in, and then you weren't there. You missed an important part of the evening. I wanted you to be here. I don't understand. What exactly did I miss? At 8 o'clock this evening, my husband Malcolm was served with divorce papers, and your wife was also served with a subpoena. Since I own the company, they were also fired. I wanted to do it in such a way that they would experience maximum humiliation. That's why I wanted you to be there. To embarrass your wife as much as possible. Wow. I'm sorry I missed this. I admire your creativity. I didn't know what else to say, so we were silent for a while. Are you going to be all right, Mrs. Hurd? Yes, of course. Why are you asking? I'm just trying to be a little tactful. Well, thanks for calling. It's time for me to go. Good luck in business. Goodbye. I hung up before she could continue the conversation. I had a long trip ahead of me. The evening went much better than I expected. I took George Foreman with me. My brother Stan and his wife Barbara lived in Huntsville. Stan had his own business servicing garage doors and barriers in his personal warehouses. There were over 100 warehouses in the area, which meant that thousands of hinged doors were in constant need of repair. He had more work than he could do. Some large enterprises had a staff of maintenance staff, but for most of them it was more profitable to outsource this work. I moved in with my brother and immediately started a new job. After working with him for 3 weeks, I started looking for a job on my own. It was a pleasant change of scene. I kept my old phone, but took out the SIM card. Stan gave me a new phone for work. I also started looking for an apartment. Living in a guest room wouldn't work for too long. I didn't talk to Sherry or anyone at home. No one knew where I was. I got an Alabama driver's license and documents for my Subaru. Life was good. Everything was going great. I had a small apartment just a few minutes walk from Stan and Barbara. One of the bedrooms was equipped with a wood carving area. I bought a small fryer to cook it with George Foreman. I didn't switch to a keto diet, but I started monitoring my carbohydrate intake. I've lost 15 extra pounds in 6 months. I did not miss my old life, but it seemed to me that I could not come to any conclusion. I expected someone to look for me, but it never happened. No one cared that I was gone. They might have missed my money, but I was sure they never missed me. I have never been served with divorce papers or any demands for any kind of support. I really didn't sleep for a few nights worrying about it, but I got rid of it quickly. Finally, one day I decided it was time. Hello, Curtis, is that you? Her voice sounded normal. Yes, I'm just calling to see if you filed for divorce. Why do you ask? Are you thinking about remarrying? No, but I thought you might. I don't want to stand in your way. There was a slight pause. Curtis, where are you? Don't you ever think about coming home? I didn't plan this. As for me, everything is fine in the way it is. What about you? Not very well, I'm afraid. Fortunately, you called on Sunday. I usually spend most of the day at work. Every morning I work at the Waffle House, and in the evening I shop at Kroger's. This is the only way I can afford to pay rent, utilities, and car insurance. I'm sorry to hear that. What happened in your company? I didn't get a response. I waited a few minutes. Can't the kids help you with something? They're both old enough to find some kind of job. Dwight was caught dealing illegal substances again, and he is serving 2 years at the Graterford Juvenile Detention Center. Gemma is in California with a guy named Rocco. I never found out his last name. so they won't help much. Well, Sherry, I'm sorry you're not doing well. If you do decide that you want to get a divorce, just let me know. How am I supposed to do this? I don't have an address, and you turn off your phone? At that moment, I quietly pressed the end button. I blocked her number and turned off my phone. I'll have to buy a new cell phone, maybe a smarter one. The turning point in my new life came next month. An exhibition of decorative and applied arts was held at the Von Braun Center in Huntsville. Stan and Barbara insisted that I come. One of Barbara's childhood friends was going to participate in the exhibition and wanted me to meet her. It sounded like some kind of setup that I resisted, but I really wanted to watch the show. Susie Doyle put on public display small figurines made of ceramics. Each of them was about 15 to 20 centimeters tall and had a unique black finish. The figures were unusual. They were animals, but unlike any I had ever seen. Some of them looked like penguins, but with heads like pelicans. I noticed several small figures of cats with owl-like faces. They were, to put it mildly, unique. After meeting him, I had a lot of questions. I probably should have been interested in Susie, but I messed it up by showing more interest in her work. Why are they all black? Do you burn them yourself? Are these real sawdust or pellets? Why are some details shiny and some dull? Susie seemed to find my questions well-founded and took the time to answer each of them as I explained them. Stan and Barbara were smiling, and Barbara seemed to be giggling a little. They apologized and continued to inspect the exhibition. I stayed and talked to Susie. I've spent more time with her than I've ever spent with any other woman. We didn't discuss anything personal, but I asked if I could visit her at home. She was very receptive. Half an hour later, Stan and Barbara returned. We stopped at the Outback for dinner. Curtis, do you realize that since we left the convention center, all you've been talking about is Susie and her animals? Barbara was kind of smiling when she said that. I was silent for a moment. I think so. I liked her. I also liked her funny little animals. I felt comfortable with her. Stan leaned across the table and looked into my eyes. That's great, Curtis. Don't miss it. I was a little confused, and Stan and Barbara noticed it. They grinned when I told them I was going to visit her this weekend. It was not difficult to find Boaz using GPS. It wasn't so easy to find the real place where Susie lived. It was not a farming area or cattle breeding, but just a rural area. The house stood off the road, about 100 meters or so away. There were several outbuildings, more than one would have guessed. I can't say it was neat, but it wasn't shabby either. I guess you could say it looked lively. Besides, it was very private here. I was greeted with hugs and the barking of a dog, which quickly calmed down when it realized that I posed no threat. The chickens didn't seem to care one way or another. We started the day with coffee and casual conversation. She couldn't wait to show me how she works with ceramics. There was a small hill about 30 meters behind the house, and on one side you could see the place where she mined clay. There were several crudely made coasters with wire mesh bottoms, which she used to sift the clay before taking it home. It soon became obvious how she managed to maintain her toned figure. Dragging the wheelbarrow along the bumpy road back to the workshop when it was full of clay was not easy. A few hours later, I was completely stunned. The only thing I didn't understand was what the sawdust had to do with it. She said it would be after lunch. Sawdust was used to burn ceramic figurines. She loaded sawdust and green clay figurines into a 250-liter barrel and then set it on fire. It took several days for the smoldering fire to reach the bottom of the barrel. By that time, all the figures had been burned. The finer the sawdust, the slower the fire burns. We ate a couple of sandwiches for lunch and then sat on the porch. She placed the refrigerator between two massive rocking chairs and smiled. I think she called Stan and Barbara before I arrived. The refrigerator was full of black and brown bottles. We never managed to visit the sawmill, but we killed a lot of long necks. Susie made us pasta for dinner, and I had coffee for the rest of the evening. No, I didn't stay the night. I really needed a GPS to get home. I started spending a lot more time in Boaz, which seemed to make Stan and Barbara happy. Although I was not at all interested in making ceramic figurines, as Susie did, I was interested to find out how she does it. Of course, I haven't been doing wood carving all this time. I spent several days putting the path from the clay quarry to the workshop in order. I also managed to purchase a two-wheeled high-capacity trolley instead of a wheelbarrow, which, in my opinion, was a little inconvenient. The main way to regulate the firing rate in her sawdust furnaces was to regulate the airflow. The type of sawdust available and its texture also influenced the firing process. I managed to adapt an old lawnmower to grind sawdust, which led to a slowdown in their burning. Garage Susie was delighted with my efforts. One thing led to another, and in the end I stayed the night in Boaz. Susie and I have become much closer. By that time, we were talking about personal things as well. I carefully explained my family problem to her, trying my best not to be vindictive. She wasn't too bothered that I was married. Her situation was a little different. Susie has been married for 30 years. They had no children. Her husband, Dave, has just retired. Shortly after they moved in, he had a heart attack. When it happened, he was in the backyard of his house. By the time she found him, he was already in such a state that nothing could be done. Their only income was his pension. If and when he dies, the pension payment will stop. Therefore, she made sure that he never died. She showed me his resting place, and I'm sure I noticed a small tear in her eye. Susie hid his death for more than 3 years. The problem was a single federal income tax, but in the computer age, it was easily overcome. The pension check came every month, and everyone was happy. One of the nice things about living in Boaz is that no one bothers you. I lived in Huntsville for a week and continued to work for Stan. I was with Susie on weekends. She was as fascinated by my wood carvings as I was by her ceramics. I had a separate corner in her workshop. Unfortunately, I didn't have much time to plan. The house she lived in with Dave needed a major renovation. There was simply no time to help her in the workshop and put things in order on the site. Yesterday, my dad called me from Ocala. Stan intercepted me before my rounds started on Monday. Is everything all right? Is Mom okay? Yes, they're all right. He called to tell me that they had received a letter from a Pennsylvania lawyer about your divorce. Sherry didn't know where to send it, so she asked me to deliver it to them. I asked him to forward it to me, and I'll make sure you get it. Damn it. It's nice to get some good news for a change. What are you going to do? I think I'll just sign it and send it back. Maybe it would be nice if I asked someone to familiarize themselves with this first. What do you think? We hired a lawyer to run the business. I'll ask him to check it out. The divorce was a pretty simple matter, so I just signed it and sent it back. She got everything that was there, and I got everything that I had with me. Now all that remained was to wait 90 days. Susie seemed pleased to hear about it, but tried not to spread it out loud. I felt a little relieved. After about 3 months, I was already living in Boaz full-time. I was still working for Stan, but I had to join the morning caravan heading to Huntsville. Like thousands of ants, residents of rural areas south of Huntsville migrate north every morning. To put the situation in perspective, thousands of the same ants flocked from the hills of Tennessee at the same time. Jobs and employment in Huntsville were booming, and people were willing to travel for a high salary. Bumper-to-bumper cars drove north in the morning and returned every evening. It was good to live. I was no longer married. Susie was active in the craft community and kept a schedule of all craft exhibitions and fairs in the area. At least once a month, she attended an event to sell her crafts. After getting a little support, she also started selling them online. The only problem was that the shipping cost was so high that it limited sales. I've often heard her silently curse Amazon. She just couldn't understand how they could ship goods for practically nothing. I didn't usually go to sales with Susie. By that time, I had accumulated a fairly large collection of wood carvings. I gave some of them to Stan and Barbara, but kept most of them for myself. I've never considered them good enough to sell. Susie asked if she could take some works to her next exhibition, and I agreed. When she returned from the last show, I had dinner ready. How did it go? Not bad. I've sold 28 copies. I'll have to work to restock for the next show. She handed me a handful of bills. What is it? I counted over $500. I've sold your magic houses, and I have orders for new ones. Wow, I didn't expect this. I was hoping you could sell a couple, but I never expected you to sell them all. It's good that I sold them. It's too bad that I sold them too cheaply. How do you know that? I found out that one of the guys who bought a couple of them also had a booth at the exhibition. I sold them to him for $60, and he took them to his place and resold them for $100. I felt like a fool. I didn't know they were so expensive. I didn't know either. I don't know if I should be upset or flattered. Anyway, don't worry, you did a great job. Next time I'll charge for them properly and take more with me. This chili smells delicious. I'd rather order more tree bark. The problem arose at the end of October. Susie was digging in the hole, and I was up the hill trying to figure out how to get a dry cedar log home. Cedar wood would be perfect for carving comforter birds. I heard it before I even saw it. You're not easy to find, Mr. Langford. He seemed to be breathing heavily, as if it was difficult for him to climb the mountain. I'm sure being overweight and having a beer belly didn't help. What really caught my attention was the large revolver in his right hand. What can I do for you? I've been racking my brain trying to figure out who this is. He seemed familiar to me, but I couldn't remember who he was. You've done too much already. It took me years to find you. I lost my job, my wife, and my life all because of you. Suddenly I remembered. It was Malcolm Hurd, my wife's ex-lover. I was confused by the fact that I actually had nothing to do with his collapse. I was just a bystander. His wife organized and carried out all this. I was trying to figure out how to explain it to him when I heard a loud bang and saw him drop the gun and slowly fall over on his side. Susie was standing behind him, holding a shovel. She looked at me, tilted her head to the side and said, "Oh." We both sat down on an old poplar stump by the path. After waiting a few minutes, we both started to worry. How hard did you hit him? He should have recovered by now. Susie just looked at me and shrugged her shoulders. It was a little awkward to sit like that. After a few more minutes, I got up, bent down and put my hand on his neck. There was no pulse. I sat down on the log again. What the hell are we going to do now? There was more curiosity than concern in her tone. I think we could just call the sheriff and say it was self-defense, but it could end up in a mess. It took a little more time to think about it. We could just bury him next to Dave and pretend nothing happened. I was amazed at how calm Susie was in such circumstances. I know this is a strange question, but did you keep Dave's wallet and personal belongings before you buried him? Yes. I still have his wallet, watch, and wedding ring at home. Why did you ask? Did any of the neighbors know Dave or spend a lot of time with him? No, not at all. Dave kept to himself. We didn't even go to visit anyone. We never went to parties or anything like that. Did he look anything like Mr. Hurd? I mean, does he look like Dave enough to pass for him? The same age, weight, and figure. Dave wore glasses. They are at my house, along with other things. What are you going to do? I'm not sure if this will work, but I thought if we could get this man's death certificate, we could pass him off as your husband and get you out of liability for pension fraud. Isn't it risky? What if someone recognizes him? We sat in silence for a few more moments. I'm going to go get Dave's stuff from home. I'll be back soon. While Susie was away, I took a moment to assess the situation. The terrain was a bit uneven and rocky. There were several damaged areas of skin and some blood on the back of his head. I moved the body slightly with a medium-sized stone and smeared as much blood on the stone as I could. There was not much blood, but enough to suggest that he had a head wound. It looked like an accidental fall. I took his wallet, watch, phone, car keys, and wedding ring from him. With glasses, Dave looked average enough to be difficult to identify. The photos from the traffic police are actually not very good. Susie called 911. The ambulance staff determined that he was indeed dead. They called the local funeral home and the sheriff's department. They both arrived within 20 minutes, and 10 minutes later Mr. Malcolm Hurd was on his way to the cremation, and Susie Doyle received a message about her late husband's death. That evening, Susie followed me as I drove Malcolm's car to Birmingham. I left it unlocked outside the Kit Kat Club, putting his wallet and phone on the front seat. 2 days later, the funeral home issued David Doyle's death certificates. After a brief trip to the TVA headquarters in Chattanooga, Susie was able to suspend her pension payment, as well as receive insurance for $100,000. That evening, we celebrated at the restaurant. I was amazed at how smoothly everything went. The ambulance staff acted effectively and knew what they were doing. A representative of the sheriff's department was satisfied with their conclusion of death and did not consider it necessary to call a medical examiner. The funeral home staff just wanted to get the body away as soon as possible. No one even looked at the driver's license. I stayed away the whole time and let Susie handle everything. She did a great job. Since Susie no longer had Dave's retirement money, she had to look for another way to get additional income. She decided that the easiest way to achieve this was to marry me. I couldn't refuse. She still had that damn shovel. End.